Breakfast is one of the most underrated and skipped meals by footballers. Although some of you might be intermittent fasting, which is a topic for an entire video, I am confident that by following some really basic principles of nutrition, you'll be able to optimize it and achieve your goals, whether these are recovery or performance oriented. So guys, what should players eat for breakfast? As with any other meal of the day, breakfast should preferably be high in lean proteins and contain a moderate to high dose of either simple or complex carbohydrates based on the timing. On top of that, you can also add a healthy fat source if you're looking to increase your caloric intake for muscle and overall weight gain. And of course, water, vitamins, and minerals are non-negotiables. 2 to 4 full cups and a small veggie or fruit portion should be more than enough. Now that we've gone over some really basic and general info, let's dig deeper into your needs. As we mentioned, carbohydrates and fats are subject to change depending on the timing. The closer you are to an intense activity like an intense training session or game, the higher the amount of carbs you will need to load up your glycogen stores, something known as carb loading. Apart from upping your morning carb intake though, the type of carb you consume also plays an important role. Prefer simple, aka fast release carbs, the mornings and hours around an intense activity, to load and replenish your glycogen, and avoid the bloating and digestive issues complex carbs may cause. On the other hand, if you're having a lower intensity or recovery day, mix it up or solely rely on complex carbohydrates. Keep your blood sugar more stable and away from sudden spikes. As far as fats are concerned, try to limit them around game days, as they can really slow down the rate at which carbs are absorbed by your body and converted into glycogen. Now, what about early morning kickoffs? Many players and teams, especially grassroots ones, have games scheduled early on in the morning, not to mention pro footballers that have most of their team practices scheduled early in the day. This might seem like a little obstacle for many, however, with the right choices, this shouldn't be an issue for you. What we usually suggest our players to do if they have an early morning kickoff or training session is to sleep and wake up early to give themselves at least a 2 to 3 hour window for digestion. If this isn't possible though, make sure to have a really good dinner 2 to 3 hours before you sleep. Just increase the intake of each nutrient and keep the ratio the same as you would do with your breakfast. Having said that, the closer you are to training or kickoff, the smaller the volume of your plate. Limited time to digest equals limited food intake. Therefore, if time is limiting you, only consume what is really important. We are mainly talking about foods that are high in simple carbs here that are quick and easy to digest. And if you're still confused with what to do, here's a little flowchart you can keep by your side, plus 3 tips you can use in any instance to adjust to your needs. Speaking of which, I would now like to talk about your personal goals. If you're into fat loss, you will probably want a breakfast that meets the basic fat loss criteria, aka a low-calorie meal to stay within a calorie deficit, and a meal that is high in protein to achieve your desired protein intake goal for the day. On top of that, it should also help you perform as close to the peak of your capabilities as possible, as this is a common issue players experience when trying to lose fat in season. So given that fat loss requires you to stay in a calorie deficit, low-calorie options are best suitable for you to achieve a lower caloric intake. To keep your breakfast calories low, you can either consume smaller portions of your meals or limit calorie-dense ingredients from your meals and keep them as lean as possible. We are mainly talking about fatty foods here, especially saturated fats. Although fats are essential, as any other nutrient, you might want to slightly decrease their intake, as they are a quote-unquote less important nutrient in comparison to proteins and carbs, at least during the fat loss process. One last thing I would like you to keep in mind, however, is to completely avoid or at least limit the fat loss process during the season. A lower caloric intake limits your energy. That is something you want to avoid. However, if your physical performance is really suffering because of excess fat, you might want to consider a slight calorie deficit, about 200 to 300 calories below your maintenance calories. Otherwise, fat loss should be considered during the off-season due to the absence of intense games. Now, what if you're trying to gain muscle and weight? In contrast to fat loss, weight and muscle gain require you to stay in a caloric surplus and maintain a high protein intake alongside proper training. Having said that, your job is to create a calorie-dense breakfast, but at the same time, sustain a high level of quality by making nutrient-rich choices. Calorie-dense foods are obviously your best friends. Healthy fats such as olive oil, nuts and seeds, avocados, and egg yolks, for example, are the way to go. By adding these ingredients to your breakfast, you drastically increase its caloric content. Another way you can go at it is by increasing the size of your portions. A higher volume breakfast, especially if combined with calorie-dense foods, equals a higher calorie meal. No matter what your goal is, you can find a list of 10 breakfasts suited to your needs by hitting the first link in the description and checking out the article that we wrote on this exact topic. Now, as you can understand, there is no magic meal that you can eat every single day and get the same results. You constantly need to adjust your diet to the demands of the training, recovery, or game day you have. Speaking of which, I'm sure you would also love to watch this video next in order to take your game day nutrition to a whole new level. Until the next time, guys, have a good one.